Over the last few years, we've heard warnings from monetary hawks about massive inflation, even hyperinflation, that could be coming in the wake of the unprecedented Federal Reserve money printing we've seen. Our next guest, Peter Schiff, is one of them. Now, critics, meanwhile, cite the low inflation reflected in the Consumer Price Index as all the evidence they need to say people like Schiff are dead wrong and central banks should just keep it going. Peter, what do you say to your critics?
Well, first of all, the CPI is not an accurate measure of inflation. So if you're pointing to the CPI as proof that there's no inflation, you're wrong. You're buying into government propaganda, which was the topic of an article and a video blog that we just came out with that shows the farce behind the CPI. It is sheer propaganda. Prices are rising at a much more rapid rate than the CPI would suggest. And I think the information in our article and in my video blog proves that.
Well, I think it's interesting because Paul Krugman, you note, he wrote a post that took aim directly at you. Are you doubling down?
Yeah, well, look, I'm not going to believe these numbers. Look, one of the statistics that we point out is a category for newspapers and magazines. Because, you know, all these newspapers, Paul Krugman works for a newspaper, they write all these articles about why there's no inflation. Maybe they haven't bothered to check the prices that they're charging for these papers. Now, the government claims, I looked at the CPI, and newspapers and magazines are one component of the CPI. And over about a 12-year period, the government claims that newspaper and magazine prices are up 35%. Yet when we actually looked at the cover prices of those newspapers and magazines, they're actually up about 135%. The real price of newspapers and magazines is rising 3.5 times faster than what the government claims. So how can you believe statistics when the numbers are so flawed? The government takes something that's gone way up in price, pretends it hasn't gone up at all, and then it comes up with this phony CPI number, and people like Paul Krugman say, you see, Peter Schiff was wrong. There's no inflation because look what the government is telling us. I don't care what the government is telling me. If the government weatherman tells me it's a sunny day and I can see it's pouring rain, I'm not going to leave the government. I'm going to go outside with an umbrella.
Well, you say if CPI stacks up the way that the other indices that you looked at do, that we could have double-digit inflation. Peter, do we have double-digit inflation?
We might already have it. I mean, if it's not double digits, right, if it's not 10 or 11, it's certainly 7, 8, or 9. I mean, it's in that area, and it's going to get a lot higher. If we keep printing money because we're sure there's no inflation, because we're looking at the government's broken barometer of a CPI, we're going to have a huge inflation problem. And one of the reasons that prices aren't rising even faster is because we're able to export a lot of the money we print. Foreign governments buy it up, and we have a huge trade deficit. So all these goods are coming in from abroad, and our money is being shipped abroad where it's buying treasuries. So that's keeping a lid on prices. But when foreign central banks start selling those dollars, and now they come back to our shores bidding up prices, we could have triple-digit inflation, or we could have hyperinflation if we don't dramatically reduce course. But people who are looking at the CPI as proof that we can print money without consequence are wrong. And in fact, I think the Federal Reserve knows that these numbers are bogus, but they're doing it anyway. Remember, during the housing bubble, they kept interest rates too low.
Yeah, they sure did get it dead wrong about the housing bubble, that's to be sure. But I do want to ask about gold, because gold typically, if you look at it historically, acts as a better hedge against major inflation than against moderate inflation, as the CPI would indicate that we have. So if that is the case, and we do have much higher inflation, as you say, why hasn't gold performed better in the last year?
Well, it has gone up. I think it's gone up every year for the past 12.
But the last year hasn't been great for gold, Peter. Come on, let's be honest. The price is pretty much where it was a year ago.
How much was it up?
Not
what was
much.
It up? 7, 8%? I mean, it's certainly up more than the bogus CPI. But if you look at where gold was 10 years ago and look at where it is now, it's certainly gone up a lot. And I think it is going to continue to go up.